I came back from Shelves in the City, which was an influencer event hosted in LA by HarperCollins, like full of ideas. While we were out in LA, I visited a couple bookstores. We went to Reparations Club as part of the event. And then we also went to the Iliad, which is a used bookstore, and we did that on our own time. And being in this used bookstore, right, I wanted to buy something, especially to have as kind of like a souvenir. I love buying books while I'm traveling. And so I was looking through and thinking about like what I could grab, whether it was something I've already read and loved, building up one of my long running series, like maybe they had some Mercy Thompson or some Eve Dallas books or something along those lines. But then I was like, maybe I'll get the next Nalini Singh, because I started reading one of her series and I got stuck on book 2, but I'm not out yet, right? I want to keep trying to read those, but I didn't find any Nalini Singh. And then my eyes landed on the thing that I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing, isn't it? As somebody who really loves urban fantasy and paranormal romance, I really love going back and like reading through like the big names in that genre. And one that I have never read before is the Anita Blake series. Anita Blake. Yes, I know it goes sort of like downhill. I've heard everything everybody has to say about like the directions that it takes in later books and everything, but I'm still curious, right? And I am somebody like that, especially this is kind of like my trash pocket genre, where I can read books that are not as good if it is like hitting those genre tropes and beats that I find really soothing. So because it is my trash pocket and because I've heard so much about Anita Blake, I decided that I wanted to start reading through it and I at least get as far as I can before, you know, I hit that wall. And so I thought it would be fun to sort of make it a bit to only buy the next book in the series from used bookstores, to make it kind of a hunt to visit used bookstores here in my city or surrounding areas. And then also when I travel to like find a used bookstore and see if I can find the next book in the series to take you along on those visits through used bookstores and also along on my journey reading through Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake series. I finally finished reading Guilty Pleasures, which took me way longer than I thought it would, considering like the size of this book, but also just how quickly I tend to read paranormal romance or urban fantasy. But this took me a long time to read because I had an absolutely miserable experience reading it. I I expected, or at least I had heard that the first book isn't very good, and I'm also used to that in urban fantasy and paranormal romance series, and I'm somebody who can invest early into a long-running series this way, but I don't think I was prepared for how much I would dislike this. My main comparison point that I kept coming back to was Naked in Death, which is the first Eve Dallas book by J.D. Nora Roberts, and I think I gave that like 2 out of 5 stars, and a lot of that was just about like the dated nature of the story and the very like alpha male dubious consent nature of the relationship very early on between Eve and Rourke. And so there were a lot of ways that I felt that that story didn't hold up super well to being read for the first time when I read it back in 2020. But there was enough there that I was sort of hooked into, particularly around the main character of Eve Dallas and the way that she is very vulnerable, the way that we get to learn about her and her past trauma and like how isolated she's made herself because of all of this, and like her very deep sense of morality and how that drives her. So there was enough of a hook there that a 2-star first book in the series, and even like I think I gave the second book like a 2.5 stars. It was like a slight improvement. I was like, okay, I'll keep going. And of course, eventually I read all 55 books at that point in the series. So I was maybe expecting something a little bit more like that, but I don't know that I have one positive thing to say about this work. Not about Anita herself, not about the world, not about the mystery, not about any of this book. It really was like a frustrating read to me, especially because I found it a little like nonsensical, and so many things were happening that just felt like they were coming out of left field, or that they clearly contradicted things that were introduced earlier. The plot was so squishy. It was so squishy that I spent the entire time feeling like I was trying to figure out not only what was going on, but like why or what exactly this was trying to set up for future books. I have now also seen people say that this is like an extended introduction to the world. And even that feels like it's giving this book a lot of grace for the work that it actually did. I started reading this with my eyeballs, and I knew that like if I did that exclusively, I probably wouldn't make it through. I find that there's something incredibly choppy about the writing style, and there is something sort of dated about the narrative voice as well. Very 90s-ish squeamish, like snarky main female character. Like that sort of like grit, oh, look at me, I'm so gritty sort of thing is very prevalent here in a way that I didn't enjoy. I feel, again, another point of comparison, someone like a Kate Daniels is also snarky, but her narrative voice had, like, I don't know, it had more variety. There was a little bit more self-awareness and more humor directed at herself and her situation, whereas that, like, the grittiness in this voice was strange to me. One, because it was kind of annoying, but also I don't know that it gives us a clear sense of who Anita Blake is. There was so much about this that I truly don't have a sense of her beyond like things that are bad. I don't like the way that she thinks about other people or interacts with other people. And like the times that we did see something slightly more humanizing to her, that then felt out of character rather than like characterizing her with other dimensions. So at the end, when she's getting really weepy about losing somebody that she had met in this book, it doesn't hit like it hit for me in Kate Daniels in book 2, I think it is, when she like meets someone within that same book, and by the end, she's crying over his death. I think that there's also a very clear reason why she is crying, and she like tells us as the reader, of course I didn't love him, like I just met him, but it was like another loss, like another thing. And so you understand her feelings in a way that I don't feel like we fully got there with Anita. I think that there were things here that felt outright contradictory instead of like, you know, the natural contradictions that we all have as people. There were ways that she is like, I'm the executioner, and then also like, killing vampires, I don't know, I'm just a baby. The swings were too wild and they were too inconsistent to, again, feel like shades of a character rather than just like, who is this person? And what are we doing here? There were so many moments plot-wise of this that I was like, what just happened and why? Like the plot summary of this first book is that Anita is a necromancer of sorts, an animator is what it's called in this book. So she can raise people back from the dead, turn them into zombies. And she works for like a private firm. And at the very beginning of the book, a vampire comes to visit her and says that vampires want to hire her to investigate a series of vampire murders. And Anita is like very hell no about this. We understand very early on it's because she doesn't like vampires. As the story goes on, we kind of get a little bit more of her history with vampires and why the feeling is mutual between Anita and vampires, but the vampires don't really take no for an answer. And so then starts this like series of events that like really make no sense if you think that the vampires want Anita's help. They like hurt her. There's like an extended sort of like weird torture thing that happens, but like why if they have her there to get her help? And then I guess you could just say that these vampires are crazy. But then like that leaves your plot feeling very like, what are we even doing here? There's one scene in particular that I think I will remember forever because like the vampire mistress, after Anita's like, fine, I'll help you. Like you're blackmailing me, you tortured me. What else can I do? Then they're like, okay, deal. And as they're leaving, like a weird string of events happens where she like turns to ask a question and another vampire is like, no, don't ask any questions. And then all of a sudden the vampire mistress attacks. And I was like, why, what? Why is she attacking? And I like literally was like, is this me? Did I just miss something? I asked my Discord and they were like, yeah, I don't know. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And too many things felt that way that I was like, I'm not tracking not only the logic, but the action in the scene. What even is happening? We get introduced to a lot of characters in here, and I wouldn't say that I'm particularly interested in any of them, but because what I know about Anita is that she ends up with like a bunch of boyfriends. The little idiot bit thing that I'm curious about is who all her boyfriends are going to be. I'm pretty sure I know one from this, even though that one is mostly absent throughout this and only like haunts her dreams or something. I don't know. I really did not find this enjoyable. I think it is also really bleak and violent in a way that just felt like bleakness and violence for the sake of it. It didn't really feel fully integrated, and probably because it like didn't have a plot to fully integrate into. It just felt like these series, like loosely connected series of actions that were really bleak and violent. And why were we doing any of it? I wish I could tell you. This is for sure getting 1 out of 5 stars from me. I would not reread this at all. I have since reread Naked in Death since the first time. And again, I gave that 2 out of 5 stars. And it was still a thing that I was like willing to go back and revisit. This, I will never, ever, ever read again. If you ever see me reach for this for any reason, please call the police. I'm never reading this again. I have now, though, committed to myself in my own head that for the purpose of this video and this project, I'm going to try and get through book 3. So I will talk to you guys about the first 3 books. I'm currently in Kansas City visiting my best friend. We're going to Palm Springs together. So I think my plan is to see if I can squeeze in a trip to a used bookstore in Palm Springs and then trying to look for the second book there, which gives me some leeway that once we get back to Kansas City, I can get the third book here and then take that home with me. And so that will be the 3 used bookstores, the 3 books for this video. And I'm just hoping and praying that when people tell me the second book is better, nobody has lied to me. We did end up with some time while we were in Palm Springs to visit a used bookstore, but there aren't actually any used bookstores in Palm Springs that I could find that were within a reasonable distance from where we were staying. So we did find that there was one branch of the public library that had like a used section. So we went to visit that. It was super cute. The library itself, like the branch, was also very, very cool, but the selection was limited and I didn't find any Laurel K. Hamilton. So when we got back to Kansas City, I had Nicole bring me to a Kansas City used bookstore. She had brought me here before and I really love it. I love the layout. I love the vibe of the store. It has a really extensive collection of books and they had a bunch of Anita Blake and here, but they didn't have number 2. They didn't have number 3. They did have number 4.
Ah, no, don't look at me.
Here she is.
Oh my gosh.
We have all of these. This is number 3, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe double check to confirm.
Yes. 4. Do I take it? Like what are the rules here to this game?
The rules are whatever you make them.
Oh, here's another one.
You are inventing these rules as you go.
Yes.
So, you know, grab the earliest, the next one you can find in the sequence.
Okay. Number 4, Kansas City. I know I committed to only reading the first 3 books in this video, but I think at that moment in the bookstore, I kind of forgot that. I was just so excited that I had found a recent-ish one. And I had 2 stops to this trip and I didn't want to come back home with nothing, so I grabbed 4. So like now we have book 1 read, we have book 4 unread, and I still need to find book 2 and 3. We are still on our mission to find book 2 in the Anita Blake series. I am now in Orlando. I really had hoped that I would find the 3rd book here by this point, but we're still looking for number 2, and I'm off to a used bookstore. I didn't mention earlier, my backseat is full of stuff for BookNet Fest, and also if you hear a lot of ambient noises because the AC in my car is going full force. It is like 100 degrees outside in Orlando right now. It's going to be a really hot BookNet Fest. But anyways, it took me like an hour in Orlando traffic to get to this bookstore. It is so good. I really enjoyed the selection of books that they had here. And it was like as organized as you can get in a used bookstore. Like everything had its little areas and whatnot. It took me a while to kind of make my way through because I never know where to start looking. So I started in sci-fi fantasy, then I went over to romance, and I could not find any Hamilton in either of those sections. Started looking in general fiction. I was like close to giving up when I came across mystery, and I was like, okay, maybe a mystery. And then around the corner from mystery, they had like a paranormal romantasy section, and I was like, I'm here. They had a few Hamilton titles, and then a sign that was like, there's more over there. So then I was like walking over there, but I kind of had a feeling that the way that it was directing me was not the correct place because that seemed more general romance. So I like was looking around as I was walking, and I found a shelf of like a lot of Hamilton. I spent some time digging through what was there, and they did have more selection on this little like shelf, but not 2 or 3. I think that I found like 5 and 6. So I was like, okay, I'll just grab like 5 and 6 because I like came all this way. I don't want to go with nothing, and we'll just like continue to piece this together as I go. So as I grab 5 and 6 and I'm walking out, I do one more like cursory look of the first place that I found Hamilton, and I happened to like look up to where they usually keep doubles, and I saw like a stack of more Hamilton, and it included number 3, Circus of the Damned. So I was like, okay, it was high enough that I needed to ask for help getting it. I went to go to talk to the lady who works there. I was like, can you please help me get this down? And she's like, do you like paranormal romance? And so that got us talking about paranormal romance. And she was like pulling things off the shelf and being like, you need to read this, you need to read this. Have you tried this? We talked about Nalini Singh and we talked about Alona Andrews. We talked a little bit about the Mercy Thompson series because like Mercy Thompson, Alona Andrews are the two that I've really, really read. And then I've dabbled, right? I've read like a couple Lindsay Sands. I just read Kim Harrison recently. So I've like tried one or two from a number of other authors. Obviously, the next big project I'm doing is Laurel K. Hamilton. So anyways, we were talking. She climbed up there to get number 3. I asked her if she could find number 2 while she was up there, and she looked for me. Couldn't find it up on that stack, but she was like, I'll look in the back to see if we have number 2. But also, we have this box over here, and they're usually just doubles, but if you want to look through, like, you can. So she went to go look in the back. I started looking through this box. I kept finding so much Charlene Harris, so I was like, man, I don't have a good, like, I wasn't hopeful, but I was just like passing the time as she was looking in the back for me. And I swear to you, the last book that I reached for in this damn box was number 2, The Laughing Corpse by Laurel K. Hamilton. Now, I like wanted to do this one book, one bookstore, truly, but I made her climb up to get Circus of the Damned. Like, and she was so helpful. She climbed up, she looked in the back, she found like every box where she had ever seen a Laurel K. Hamilton. So I ended up getting number 2 and number 3 here at this Orlando bookstore, literally called Best Used Books. It's in Longwood, Florida, actually, which is why it took me an hour to get here in Orlando traffic. Also, like after an hour of driving, I was like, I'm leaving with 2. So we did it. We found number 2, we found number 3. And I think if in the next 2 weeks, if I can finish 2, 3, and I already have 4 from Kansas City, we can wrap up this first part of the project and video, and then that way I can decide if I'm going to keep reading on the series, and if I am, I can try and find number 5 when I go to New York. So that's what we have going on. The only other thing is that I told you, she was like, have you read this? Have you read this? Have you read this? And I was like, no. But the one that she like put in my hand and is like, you're reading this, is Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. So this one's coming home with me too. So a very successful outing in Orlando, and now an hour drive back, maybe more because it's 4 p.m. on a Tuesday here home. But you know, the things that you do for content. I finished reading The Laughing Corpse. I actually finished reading this a few days ago, but when I got back from Book Nook Fest, I wasn't feeling great. So I came back home, I crashed, and I'm finally getting around to telling you about The Laughing Corpse. This was better than the first book in one significant way. So we'll start there. I think that this was better because the plot was better. The plot was firmer. There's a mystery that is introduced at the beginning of this book, and we follow it more logically to the end. The problem with Guilty Pleasures is that there was like no real sense of what the plot was doing. This felt a lot firmer. It feels like it's more in its bag in terms of like introducing the case or the monster of the week. And so that made it a lot easier to read. Now, that said, there were a couple of things that were maintained from book 1 to book 2, and one thing that I think was actually worse in book 2. This feels to me even more dated than book 1. I felt like book 1 was dated in that sort of like 90s misogynistic sort of paranormal way. There's something about Anita that is like not like other girls. We're told over and over how teeny tiny she is, but she's a badass in a very like in your face way. And so all of those things felt dated. All of that was present here as well. But like the racism in this is dialed up a notch. I don't know if I just completely missed it in book 1. Maybe it's only mentioned, or I don't know what happened. But Anita is Mexican. Her mother is Mexican. Her mother's side of the family is Mexican. And in this book, she meets a voodoo priestess who is also Mexican. And she spends the entire book calling Anita Chica. And I just kept thinking about the the parody that I did. In my head, I just kept hearing, Hola Chica. The portrayal overall was very stereotypical. There were a number of side characters of color that were also very stereotypical. And in that way, it felt even worse. It felt even more dated than book 1 to me. So the way that I think that is like now maintaining from book to book, that is actually what's making it difficult for me to sink into this, that even though the plot was firmer here, there's still a lot of like wishy-washiness in the character and characterization. A good example of this is that we are meeting the voodoo priestess for the first time. Anita's there because she's investigating the murder of a family. The young child is missing. They don't know if the child is alive or dead. And so Anita like doesn't want to be here, but she's here because of the investigation. And early on in this interaction, it's clear that the voodoo priestess is like testing Anita, wants Anita to participate in things that Anita doesn't feel comfortable with. And she like stands up and she's like, I'm not doing this, not even for the murder. Like that's the line. But the scene continues. And then later on in the scene, the voodoo voodoo priestess asks her to do something that's like even worse than what was earlier in the scene. And Anita's like, I gotta do it. I gotta do it for the young boy and the murder. And I'm like, what? You were about to walk away because you wouldn't do it even for the murder. And now you're like, oh, it's all for the murder. That kind of internal contradiction happens not infrequently. And in a way that feels like it's not letting Anita's character fully develop. She's just kind of doing what the scene wants her to do. I wish there was a stronger sense of Anita, not just kind of the way she talks, which is a big thing here, but her sense of like what is driving her morality. Right now, she's just kind of going through the motions of being an animator. She's just doing her job. And that unfortunately isn't hooky enough for me when there are so many other things in the novel that are also kind of dated and not that great. I wish there were a stronger Anita to be like the thing that I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna keep reading though, because that gal, her voice is also kind of annoying to me. She has this tendency of saying something like very like plainly or baldly, delving into sarcasm, like, oh, great, now I have to visit the vampires. And then she'll add a right or a yeah, okay, or like a bully for me sort of thing. It doesn't happen like super frequently, but it's enough that every time that it happens, I'm like, oh my God, please stop. I don't know why something about the character voice is just not sinking in with me. I feel like I'm missing some kind of earnestness for the character or morality or motivation. For me personally, it has to be one of those things for me to be like, okay, this is a character that I'm willing to follow. But unfortunately, it just hasn't shown up as of book 2. I think I gave Guilty Pleasures 1 star. I would give The Laughing Corpse like 1.5 star. The plot really probably bumps it up more than that, but then the racism knocks it back down again. So that's how we're starting with this. I finished reading Circus of the Damned, and I hit this point where I was kind of like unsure what I wanted to do with this project and with this video. At this point, as I'm recording this video, I've already edited everything else that you've seen in this video, and I really love this video. I love the project of this video. It's been so fun going to the used bookstores and trying to find these books. So like, I don't want to abandon the project, but I also didn't want to get back on here for a third update just saying that I didn't like this book. In trying to figure out what I would do here, I figured that I would just kind of like marathon through and also finish the Lunatic Cafe to give you my final thoughts on both of these books and on this series as a whole. In Circus of the Damned, Anita is investigating a series of murders that tie back to rogue master vampires who are in her city. And so she gets caught up in this turf war between these master vampires and the master of the city, Jean-Claude, who is one of her love interests. Mostly, I just had the same issues with this that I've been having while reading. But it was through the final, I'd say maybe like 75 pages of this that I really sort of solidified another big problem that I had with all of this. And to me, it is a problem that I now forever associate with Game of Thrones. And that is when a story doesn't have enough wins to balance its losses. And I understand that there are some stories that are dark or are tragic, but I think from a construction and craft perspective, whenever you have any story that is too one note or too headed in one direction, right, where you don't have peaks and valleys, then you risk really weighing down the story. And I don't think the Anita Blake series has enough peaks to balance out all of the valleys. We are continuously watching violence be inflicted on Anita. We are continuously watching her lose. We are continuously watching her be manipulated into situations she can't get out of. She is constantly being strong-armed by the people around her to perform, to investigate, to help. And even when she says, yes, I will help you, even within sort of like her giving consent, she is then further strong-armed into making decisions that she doesn't want to make. And this entire book places her in between this turf war. So she's like going back and forth between these two powers that don't have her best interest at heart. And on top of that, at this point, she is carrying some of Jean-Claude's marks. So she is one mark away basically from being his human servant. And she does not want that. She is physically attracted to Jean-Claude. So we get a lot of like, my body is saying yes bullshit, but she vehemently does not want to serve him. So it's ping-ponging the entire book about like not wanting to be his servant, but also having a level of protection and some like enhancements to her own abilities because she has these marks, and also Jean-Claude being like the better option against these master vampires, but still not being a good option. So it's loss after loss, bad option after bad option. And even when she solves the mystery of the book, it doesn't feel like a true win. It just consistently makes me feel grimy as I'm reading. Then I read book 4, which is the Lunatic Cafe. And in this one, we spend more time with the lycanthropes of this world. So we meet a werewolf in book 3, who then Anita is dating in book 4 pretty seriously. It's been a couple of months. The thing that she really enjoys about him is that he makes her feel normal. He's a teacher and he takes her out to plays and he likes musicals, and there's like something very like endearing and normal about him when she is in a world surrounded by monsters. But she gets pulled deeper into the world of the wolves in this story because they come to her for help when wolves are being killed across the city. And she once again gets put in the middle of a power struggle between the alpha of the wolves and the guy that she's dating, who is next in line. And as she sees more of the wolves, as she sees more of this guy's wolfish side, then she starts second guessing her relationship with him because he is ultimately a monster who is very good at playing human. I almost quit this book because at the beginning of this, Anita gets called into a crime scene. She works with a police unit that is very specialized. They do paranormal crimes essentially. And so they get called into this crime scene, but the local police force is like putting up a fight in terms of relinquishing the case and wanting them on site. And so when Anita gets there, she's not a cop, but she's there to consult. She meets a very overzealous cop who ultimately threatens her and pulls a gun and all of that. And so one of the cops that she works with, who is a black man, comes over to try and defuse the situation. And this bad cop, because he is being depicted as a bad man, uses the N-word, like hard ER, against this black cop 3 times. I was going back and forth between the physical copy and the audiobook copy I got from my library. And at this point, I was listening right before bed. So like in the dark, headphones on, just listening to this book before I fell asleep. And I had a jump scare when I heard this narrator, say this word in my ear. Even had a moment where I was like, did I really hear that? I turned on the light. I went back out to my living room to grab the physical copy where I had been reading it earlier. And I flipped the pages to confirm, and then the bad cop said it 2 more times. We do later get his boss coming over to say something along the lines of we don't hold language like that. But Anita's reaction to that is that from the look on Atkinson's face, you would have thought the sheriff had told him there was no Santa Claus. I was betting the sheriff was a good old boy in the worst sense of the word. So the implication is that these men are racist cops who use this language frequently, and it's not being depicted as a good thing. And this is a book that was written in 1996, I think, or sometime in the late 90s. And so I understand all of that. But at that point, I had not been enjoying this at all. And then I hit the N-word completely unprepared for it. And I was just, I had a moment where I was like, what? Why am I doing this? I don't want to be doing this anymore. After that, though, I did just crank up the audiobook full speed and blast through the rest of this. So overall, my impressions of Anita Blake in terms of the first 4 books of this series are that this is not a good series. And I feel like a lot of people would agree with that. Even people who are fans of this work, or maybe people who fell in love with it when they were young, can now look back with their fully formed frontal lobes and say, maybe that wasn't great, right? But I think that for a lot of people who are fans or have been fans, these were fun in some way. There was something sort of addictive about them, or some sort of hook here that they still enjoyed reading. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is exactly the kind of thing that should be in my trash pocket that I can get along with, even if they are dated, even if they are imperfect, this is the area where I am willing to be more forgiving of certain things in order to get the beats of the genre that I find really comforting. I think that the worst crime of these, the reason that I can't overlook all of the other stuff about this in terms of the racism and the dated language and Anita being kind of a 90s typical bad girl or whatnot, is because there are not compelling plot cores. Laurel K. Hamilton is not writing a good mystery. She's writing these really weird spaghetti against the wall, loosely connected series of events that Anita is not necessarily even sort of investigating in logical ways, right? Again, she's being manipulated and strong-armed into situations, and the bad guys fall in her lap because they're always there to cause her some harm. That's not compelling to me, especially because I don't find Anita particularly fun to read from. I can't tell you what arc Anita was on in 4 books, what she learned, how she changed. What is her motivation? I have no idea. She has no motivation outside of like immediately surviving all of the bad situations that she's put in. There are no other characters here that I found especially compelling. The love interests that she's setting up, I hate the dynamics there. I think that before I started book 3, I was kind of like, I don't like these, but still thinking about whether or not I would commit to reading more. And just like, I don't know, there's a little bit of curiosity about how exactly these go off the rails and if they ever get better. But I think 4 really just tapped me out of this entire project. I can say that I gave it a real college try, but for the life of me, the appeal here is absolutely beyond me. And now I have these 4 books that I will probably give back to a used bookstore. I would love to continue the series, not with Anita Blake, but with another long-running popular series. I was thinking maybe with the Psy Changeling series, but I am open to suggestions in the comments. If you have a series that you think I should do next in the same format where I try to find the books in order at used bookstores and then read and review them, please let me know. I'd love to hear what you guys think I should read next. Hopefully it is better than Anita Blake. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.